So, Mike Johnson, the guy who's bent over backwards to defend Donald Trump at every turn, just got absolutely torched by Trump himself for daring to suggest that maybe, just maybe, shutting down the government right before the holidays wasn't the smartest political move. Johnson has been Trump's most loyal soldier in the House. He defended Trump during both impeachments, backed every election conspiracy theory, and rushed to Mar-a-Lago for his blessing before accepting the speaker's gavel. But guess what? Trump just publicly called him weak, pathetic, and a sellout for even considering a compromise on the spending bill. It's honestly hard to believe he said that out loud. This isn't just about one spending fight or one politician getting thrown under the bus. We're talking about the complete erosion of any ability to actually govern, where doing your constitutional duty as speaker means getting destroyed by your own party's leader. And trust me, the fallout from this is going to reshape the entire Republican conference heading into 2025. Let me fill you in on what's been happening. So, Mike Johnson became Speaker of the House back in October 2023. He stepped up after Kevin McCarthy got booted in that chaotic mess where 8 Republicans joined with every Democrat to kick McCarthy out. From the get-go, Johnson seemed like the perfect Trump ally. The guy rushed down to Mar-a-Lago before even accepting the position to get Trump's blessing. He stood outside that New York courthouse during Trump's criminal trial to show solidarity. Whether it was defending Trump's actions on January 6th, pushing the election fraud narrative in multiple states, or blocking every attempt to investigate Trump's classified documents case, Johnson really cemented himself as Trump's most reliable defender in Congress. He wasn't some reluctant supporter or fair-weather friend. This was a true believer who put Trump's interests above everything else, including his own political survival. But here's where things get interesting. We're now 3 weeks into a government funding crisis. Federal workers are staring at furloughs right before Christmas. Military families are scrambling because their housing allowances are on hold. Critical safety inspections are getting slashed. National parks are preparing to close. Veterans benefits processing is left in the lurch. This mess is unfolding because hardline Republicans and Democrats are at a standstill over the debt ceiling, Ukraine funding, and border security provisions. And guess who's stuck right in the middle? Yep, Mike Johnson. He is supposed to be the guy who keeps the government running and gets bills passed. But here's the kicker. Donald Trump isn't interested in reasonable compromises or avoiding a shutdown. He wants a full-scale showdown, complete government closure, and total capitulation from Democrats on everything. And before we go any further, let's be real for a second. The Speaker's job is actually to pass legislation and keep the government functioning, not to burn everything down for political theater. Now back to the matter at hand. Reports from around December 18th revealed just how furious Trump was getting. He labeled Johnson's proposed continuing resolution as a complete betrayal, and even went as far as to say that any Republican who votes for it should be primaried out of office. Talk about strong words. Essentially, Trump was calling Johnson a traitor for not sticking to his exact wishes of forcing a shutdown until Democrats agreed to slash spending by 40% and fund the border wall. And this wasn't a private conversation behind closed doors at Mar-a-Lago. Trump made sure to air his grievances publicly on Truth Social, making it clear that he was not happy with Johnson trying to actually do his job. This announcement sent shockwaves through House Republicans because it raised all sorts of questions. If Donald Trump, the big guy himself, could turn against his most loyal speaker, what did that mean for everyone else scrambling to maintain their positions and avoid primary challenges? Now, this isn't the first time we've seen this pattern. Trump's loyalty really only extends to himself and his immediate political needs. Whenever someone stops being useful or does something he doesn't like, even something completely reasonable, he's quick to turn on them without any hesitation. We've spotted this pattern time and time again over the last 8 years. Just think about how he turned on Jeff Sessions. Right after Sessions recused himself from the Russia investigation, Sessions was Trump's first major Senate endorser, stuck his neck out when barely anyone in the establishment would touch Trump's campaign, and became Attorney General as a reward. But the moment Sessions followed basic ethical guidelines and recused himself because he was involved in the campaign being investigated, Trump spent 2 years publicly humiliating him, calling him weak, stupid, and disloyal before finally forcing him out. Then there was Bill Barr. Trump wasn't pleased when Barr refused to claim the 2020 election was stolen. Barr had been Trump's most aggressive attorney general, the guy who spun the Mueller report to make it sound like total exoneration, who intervened in Roger Stone's sentencing, who tried to drop charges against Michael Flynn. But when Barr came out in December 2020 and said the Justice Department found no evidence of widespread fraud that would change the election outcome, Trump turned on him instantly, called him a coward, weak, a disappointment. Barr resigned rather than continue being attacked for telling the truth. And let's not forget how he distanced himself from Mike Pence when Pence refused to illegally overturn the election on January 6th. Pence had been the most loyal vice president imaginable, never contradicted Trump publicly, defended every insane thing Trump said or did, stood by him through scandals that would have made most politicians run for the hills. But when Pence said he couldn't constitutionally reject electoral votes, Trump sent a mob to the Capitol that was literally chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." Trump didn't call off the mob. He tweeted that Pence didn't have the courage to do what needed to be done. Even Kevin McCarthy faced a similar fate when he criticized Trump after January 6th. McCarthy initially said Trump bore responsibility for the attack on the Capitol, then flew to Mar-a-Lago to grovel and get back in Trump's good graces. He spent 2 years doing everything Trump wanted, launched investigations into Hunter Biden, blocked investigations into January 6th, gave Tucker Carlson exclusive access to security footage, and what did McCarthy get for all that loyalty? Trump stayed neutral when the hardliners moved to oust McCarthy as Speaker. Didn't lift a finger to save him, just watched as McCarthy became the first speaker in American history to be removed by his own party. Now, it looks like Mike Johnson is in the hot seat, facing the exact same treatment. And this pattern is becoming all too familiar and frankly quite predictable at this point. You can show all the loyalty in the world and defend Trump every single day, rush to his criminal trial to show support, push his conspiracy theories, block investigations into his conduct. But the moment you step out of line or cease to be useful or try to do your actual constitutional job, he'll toss you aside without a second thought. It doesn't matter how many times you defended him or how far you stuck your neck out. The only thing that matters is whether you're doing exactly what he wants right now, this minute. So, what did Johnson do to tick off Trump so badly? Well, it all boils down to the fundamental tension between keeping the government open and refusing to compromise with Democrats. The impasse happened because House Republicans wanted massive spending cuts, full border wall funding, and an increase in the debt ceiling, while Democrats were trying to maintain current spending levels, fund Ukraine, and avoid default. Ultimately, the government just stayed stuck in crisis mode, since no one was willing to budge on their positions. As Speaker, Johnson decided to take a pragmatic stance initially. He worked with Democrats on a short-term continuing resolution and refused to force a shutdown right before Christmas. His approach seemed to be just keeping the lights on, while buying time to negotiate larger deals later. At first, Trump seemed to be on board with this idea, at least publicly. He appreciates fighters and the notion of tactical retreats to win bigger battles later. Trump even said Johnson was doing a great job back in early December. But as the funding crisis dragged into its third week, some serious issues started cropping up. Public opinion was turning against Republicans, defense readiness was being affected, and veterans groups were raising hell about delayed benefits, while Democrats were steadfast and holding their ground. Predictably, the public began to shift their blame toward Republicans, and specifically toward the Speaker. Polls indicated that Americans were increasingly frustrated with the chaos and dysfunction, with 58% saying they blame Republicans if the government shut down. This was the moment Trump began to sweat a little. You see, Trump values winning, looking strong, and overall being seen as the dominant force who never loses. He doesn't want to be tied to a catastrophic shutdown that's killing military readiness and making Republicans look incompetent. That's definitely not the victory he seeks or the narrative he wants heading into 2025. And then Johnson went ahead and made a move that, according to Trump, was a serious misstep and complete betrayal. Johnson started looking for ways to compromise and figured he should actually negotiate with Democrats and pass something bipartisan. He even considered accepting a clean continuing resolution without all the poison pills that Democrats would never accept anyway. He was talking with Hakeem Jeffries about potential paths forward, exploring options to avoid default and keep critical services running. But then, when Trump caught wind of all this, he absolutely lost it on Truth Social and in calls with House Republicans. In Trump's eyes, compromising is just a sign of weakness and capitulation. Negotiating with Democrats, that's pure betrayal. Working with Hakeem Jeffries to keep the government open, unforgivable. Any Republican who dares to vote for a bill that doesn't include everything Trump demands is instantly labeled a traitor and Rhino who deserves to be primaried. Trump started calling Johnson pathetic and saying he doesn't have what it takes to be speaker. He told Republicans to vote against Johnson's plan and force a shutdown instead, claiming it would be Biden's shutdown, even though Republicans control the House. Now, this left Johnson in an absolutely impossible spot. On one side, he really needs Trump's backing to maintain his position as speaker. The MAGA base and the Freedom Caucus will drop him like a hot potato if Trump gives the signal. There are already rumblings that Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and other hardliners are preparing to file a motion to vacate if Johnson passes anything with Democratic votes. On the flip side, Johnson actually has to get down to the basic job of being speaker. That means figuring out how to keep the government funded, prevent a catastrophic default on the national debt, and ensure critical services continue functioning for the American people. The tricky part is all of that requires some level of compromise with Democrats and working across the aisle. So Johnson is caught in a classic catch-22 bind. He can either keep trying to please Trump, which means refusing all compromise, forcing a government shutdown right before Christmas, letting the country potentially default on its debt, and that only makes the crisis worse and paints Republicans in a terrible light heading into the election year. The public doesn't want chaos and shutdowns. They want competence and stability, or Johnson can do his actual job as Speaker of the House, which means negotiating with Democrats, passing a bill to keep the government open, and preventing default, but that will definitely make Trump turn against him completely and probably cost him the speakership within weeks. It's a tough situation, and that's the impossible mess Trump creates for Republican leaders. He demands complete loyalty and wants them to blow everything up and refuse any compromise without budging. But then he points fingers and calls them weak losers when things go south and the public blames Republicans. He's not shy about tossing them under the bus whenever it suits him politically or whenever he needs a scapegoat for his own failures. This whole scenario is causing major stress and fracturing within the House Republican Conference. If Trump has turned on Mike Johnson and is willing to publicly undermine his own hand-picked speaker, every Republican member is left wondering if they're the next target. Are they next on the chopping block? Those moderate Republicans who are trying to balance their district's needs with party loyalty are now worried sick about being the next one to get tossed aside and primaried. They represent swing districts where a government shutdown would be politically disastrous, where their constituents actually want them to govern responsibly. But defying Trump means certain primary defeat. Meanwhile, the Freedom Caucus and hardline members believe Johnson isn't conservative enough and that he's too open to compromise with the establishment. They think he's betraying conservative principles by even talking to Democrats. Things became even more intense when Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of Trump's most loyal defenders in Congress, broke away from Johnson publicly. She had been pushing for a full shutdown until Democrats agreed to impeach Biden and defund the Justice Department's prosecutions of January 6 defendants and criticize Johnson for being weak and caving to the establishment. When someone as aligned with Trump as Greene starts turning against you, someone who literally showed up at Trump's criminal trial multiple times, you know you're in a world of hurt. This is creating a death spiral for Johnson's speakership. The moderate Republicans who actually want to govern are getting ready to work with Democrats if necessary. The hardliners are preparing to oust Johnson the moment he compromises, and Trump is feeding the chaos by attacking his own speaker, making it nearly impossible for anyone to actually lead the conference. The legal and institutional challenges are piling up too. The Treasury Department decided to take formal action about the debt ceiling crisis. On December 20th, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen sent a letter to congressional leaders, stating that Johnson's refusal to address the debt ceiling was creating an unconstitutional crisis and threatening America's credit rating. She pointed out that the Constitution requires the government to pay its debts, that defaulting would violate the 14th Amendment's public debt clause, and that playing political games with the full faith and credit of the United States was reckless and potentially illegal. The legal process moved pretty quickly once major creditors and financial institutions started filing amicus briefs supporting Treasury's position. After all, every day this crisis continues means higher borrowing costs, potential market crashes, and damage to America's standing in global financial markets. And let me tell you, when the credit rating agencies started threatening to downgrade U.S. debt, that got people's attention fast. Moody's issued a warning that was basically legal speak for saying, you've got no solid ground to stand on here. You're playing Russian roulette with the global economy. You're just abusing your constitutional authority. The Treasury Secretary, calling out the Speaker by name and threatening legal action, created a real stir. It's a significant move, reminding Johnson that he isn't above the Constitution or basic economic reality. This is the kind of institutional breakdown that doesn't usually happen in functioning democracies. When your own government's Treasury Department is threatening legal action against the Speaker of the House, things have gone completely off the rails. Legal experts are noting that we haven't seen this level of institutional breakdown and constitutional crisis over basic government functioning since the Civil War era. Jonathan Turley, a constitutional law professor who frequently appears on Fox News and is definitely not some liberal partisan, went on Fox and made a statement that really should catch everyone's attention. He said that if House Republicans force a default to satisfy Trump's demands, it would be nearly impossible to defend constitutionally, that the courts would almost certainly intervene, and that it could permanently damage the Republican Party's credibility on fiscal issues. Just think about that for a moment. This is coming from someone who defended Trump during both impeachment trials. And this is coming from a conservative voice on Fox News, not MSNBC or CNN. When your own side's legal experts are using words like nearly impossible to defend and constitutional crisis, that's the moment to really pay attention. Neil Katyal, a former acting Solicitor General and constitutional scholar, mentioned that the Speaker's position was legally indefensible and that using the debt ceiling as a hostage-taking mechanism violated basic principles of constitutional governance. When legal experts from both sides start tossing around terms like hostage-taking and constitutional crisis, that's when you know this has moved beyond normal political hardball into genuinely dangerous territory. So let's break down what this showdown could mean, because it's not just a captivating political drama or Washington inside baseball. It has serious consequences for how our government operates and whether we can still function as a democracy. First up is the immediate political fallout. Johnson is already facing significant backlash due to the funding crisis, and his approval ratings are taking a serious hit. Republican representatives are getting anxious about the upcoming 2024 elections, which is definitely adding to the tension, getting attacked by Trump while also being blamed by the public for a government shutdown. And honestly, that's not the best look for him or for the Republican Party. Most folks in America have a good deal of respect for basic government functioning as a vital part of our system, even if they don't always agree with every spending decision. They expect Congress to at least keep the lights on and pay the bills. Democrats are definitely planning to take advantage of this situation. They'll argue that Johnson and House Republicans believe they're above basic governance, that they don't hold the Constitution in high regard, and they'll have Trump's own attacks on Johnson backing up those claims. This is going to be Exhibit A in proving that Republicans can't govern responsibly and are more interested in chaos than competence. You can expect to see footage of closed national parks, interviews with furloughed federal workers, and warnings about defaulting on the debt popping up in Democratic campaign ads, speeches, and debates throughout 2024. Every Democratic candidate will be hammering home the message that this is what happens when you elect Republicans who are more loyal to Trump than to their constitutional duties. Now, let's touch on what this means for the institution of the Speaker itself and for Congress more broadly. The Speaker's office has been working hard to maintain some level of independence and institutional authority, wanting it to be viewed as a constitutional office with real responsibilities. But by allowing Trump to dictate whether the government stays open or shuts down, by letting an outside force who holds no official position determine legislative strategy, Johnson's waded right into a crisis of institutional legitimacy. Trump and his supporters are now poised to attack any speaker who tries to govern responsibly, implying that compromise is weakness and questioning the motives of anyone who takes their constitutional duties seriously, which complicates things for the speaker's image as an independent constitutional officer. Yet Johnson probably felt he had no other choice initially if he stood up to Trump from the beginning. He would have been removed as speaker within days. But now he's discovering that appeasing Trump doesn't work either, because Trump's demands are literally impossible to meet while still doing the basic job of keeping the government running. This situation shines a massive spotlight on whether we still have a functioning system of checks and balances, or whether one person can simply blow up the entire government whenever he feels like it. At the heart of the issue is whether the Speaker can just refuse to allow votes on keeping the government funded and paying America's debts whenever it serves Trump's political interests. If Johnson gets his way on that, If he can simply shut down the government and threaten default to extract political concessions, it could totally change how our entire legislative system operates. The founders designed Congress to be a deliberative body where different interests negotiate and compromise to serve the public good. They never intended for the speaker to be a puppet of an outside political figure, someone who refuses to even allow votes on basic government functioning because it might displease the former president. The debt ceiling was created to give Congress oversight of borrowing, not to be used as a weapon to blow up the economy if you don't get everything you want. But Johnson and Trump have always been uncomfortable with those limitations. They crave total control over everything, the ability to govern by threat and ultimatum rather than negotiation and compromise. If this becomes the new normal, if speakers can simply refuse to govern and threaten economic catastrophe whenever their political leader demands it, that's a significant boost to executive-style power concentrated in one person's hands, and it opens the door for future leaders to misuse that power even more egregiously. It fundamentally transforms Congress from a co-equal branch into a subservient tool of whoever can threaten primary challenges most effectively, so the implications of this case reach far beyond just Trump, Johnson, and the current Republican conference. It's about shaping the structure of American government and democratic norms for many years to come. Each time Trump brushes aside norms, breaks institutional traditions, or attacks the basic functions of government, it weakens our democratic systems and makes them more fragile. It starts making behavior that used to be completely unacceptable feel normal and routine. Think about it carefully. If Trump can destroy a speaker for doing the basic constitutional duty of keeping the government funded, what's to stop the next authoritarian-minded leader from doing the same? If he can just threaten economic catastrophe whenever he wants political concessions, what's to prevent another would-be strongman from following that lead and taking it even further? These actions don't just disappear when Trump leaves office or fades from the political scene. They become part of our new reality, the new baseline for what's acceptable in American politics. And that's pretty dangerous for the long-term health of our democracy. Democracy relies on those norms and institutions, assuming that people in power will play by the rules and respect constitutional boundaries, even when it's a bit inconvenient or politically costly. When those norms crumble, when leaders can simply refuse to govern because it serves their political interests, democracy itself starts to falter and breakdown becomes possible. Looking ahead to the 2024 elections, it's clear that all of this is going to have some significant effects on Republican prospects. We're still 11 months out from those elections, but the narrative being set now is bound to influence how things go and what voters think about Republican governance. If the story playing out is one of Republicans battling basic government functions and coming out on the losing side, creating chaos and dysfunction, while Democrats are offering stability, that spells serious trouble for Republicans in competitive districts. Voters usually don't reward chaos and dysfunction, especially when it affects their daily lives through closed services and economic uncertainty. They want stability and competence, leaders who can actually govern rather than just blow everything up for political theater. Right now, Republicans aren't offering either of those things. So expect Democrats to champion a message focused on restoring normalcy and competent governance. After years of chaos under Trump's influence, constant constitutional crises, and government shutdowns, there are folks who believe that if you vote for Democrats, Congress will actually start working again. They're promising no more constant constitutional crises or squabbles with reality, just good old normal governance where bills get passed and the government stays open. That message might just hit home for a lot of voters, including some moderate Republicans and independents who are exhausted by the endless drama and chaos. The contrast couldn't be clearer. Democrats offering to actually govern versus Republicans threatening to blow everything up if they don't get their way. So here's the deal. Mike Johnson spent 2 years defending Donald Trump, rushed to his criminal trial to show support, pushed every conspiracy theory Trump wanted, and his reward is getting publicly destroyed for trying to keep the government open. This isn't just about one speaker or one spending fight. It's about whether we have a political party that can actually govern or whether we're stuck with performative chaos that serves one man's ego at the expense of everything else, including basic constitutional functioning. If Trump gets away with destroying speakers for doing their constitutional duty, if he can make governing itself impossible by threatening anyone who compromises, then we're basically saying that normal democratic processes don't matter anymore. That would mean we're stepping into a completely new realm where loyalty to Trump matters more than loyalty to the Constitution, where keeping the government open is considered betrayal. It's about so much more than just whether the government shuts down this week. It's about whether we genuinely have a Congress that can still function, or if we're just stuck with whoever can survive Trump's next rage-fueled Truth Social post. So keep an eye on this situation. Things are just heating up. Johnson's either going to cave completely to Trump and face institutional breakdown, or he's going to try to govern and get removed as Speaker. Either way, the Republican Party is eating itself alive while Trump watches from Mar-a-Lago. The next few weeks are going to be crucial. The stakes have never been higher, the institutional damage more severe, and the outcome more unpredictable. This is just the beginning of what promises to be a complete meltdown of Republican governance heading into 2024.